Look what they've done to Star Wars. A wretched rebirth. Tolkien's rolling in his grave as they destroy Middle-earth. I was filled with grief. It was time to make a stand. These social justice story thieves have forced my hand. So I had to write to fight the hacks. I'm letting all of my rage out. I'm StoryMan-Jack.
Well, here we are. Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for checking out this story. I really appreciate it. This story's late, I know. It's supposed to be out a week ago. I'm currently and temporarily preoccupied with life at the moment. I hope everybody understands. I'm doing my best to find the time to release these stories for you guys, and for me, to be honest. It's very fun and satisfying to make something new, or something old in a new way. Yeah, I'm busy, but that isn't the only reason this story is late. This story is late because it had to be changed. Thought maybe it was a teachable moment. Once we get into the story, those of you who watched the creative Just the Tips videos that preceded this story, and how I outlined and told us what we were going to do, you'll find that I didn't follow the plan I laid out at all. I don't even think the first paragraph is the same. That story was supposed to be campy and funny, but I couldn't get it to work. The writer's life for me, right? Go figure. That's just the way it goes, though. Sometimes the direction you want is sidelined by anything. You end up with something else, and that something else might and probably is better than what you intended in the first place. So, this story's a little dark, but I hope you enjoy it. If you would, though, please click on that like button, because the YouTube algorithm thingy hates us all, and supposedly that helps. Share this story out with your friends, because nobody else is going to. And if you haven't, please consider subscribing. Above all else, though, all joking aside, even if you don't subscribe, please leave a criticism below. I'm not even going to call them comments anymore. I want criticism. Harsh, mild, whatever. You see, and it's something that the elites don't understand. If you want to get better, you got to listen to people. Tell me what stinks. See if I can clean it up a little bit on the next one. So again, thank you for listening. And now, on with the story. Finding Harry by StoryMan-Jack. Jimmy Sullivan Jr. was sleepy. They spent all day at his mom's cousin's house and stayed until quite late playing board games. "Would you mind going through Hagerman?" his mother Sally had asked her husband. Jim shrugged. "I guess." "Thank you. I know you hate it," Sally said and yawned. A chuckle erupted from the driver's seat. "No, I just hate driving so slow. 15 miles an hour, he shrugged. Feels a little like it takes forever." I know, but we timed it, and it's half an hour faster," she told him. He just shrugged and turned toward the Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge. on the shores of Lake Texoma, the lake that ran a portion of the border between the states of Texas and Oklahoma. The speed limit was only 15 miles an hour once you got on federal land, and Junior knew that his father didn't like driving through it, not just because he's going so slow, but because he's gotten a federal parking ticket before. One, which is about 10 times the amount of a normal speeding ticket. And federal tickets, you just can't fight. Seems game wardens are literally the most powerful law enforcement agents in the entire country. There was a good reason for the limit on speed, and that was the wildlife itself. Have you ever hit a grown white-tailed deer at 50 miles an hour and survived? If you have, you know. It doesn't do good things to a vehicle. And this little family's 1-ton Ford pickup had a cattle guard, or as they had always called it, a deer chucker. Jimmy was watching the deep forest on either side of the road, and then the long stretches of wetlands leading up to the shores of the lake. There were towns down there under the water, whole communities and buildings just lying feet beneath the waves. The kid was contemplating such things when a deer darted suddenly across the road. The flash of white and cream bouncing in startled fear across the white of the rock caused Junior's dad to brake harshly, bringing them all to a sudden stop. They sat for a moment, startled, as everyone does when you nearly hit a deer with your vehicle. And that was when what was chasing the deer lumbered along the same path across the white of the road. "What the fuck is that?" Junior croaked, leaning forward between his parents in the front seat. Sally, instead of scolding him for his language, said, yeah, Jim, just what the fuck was that?" The form chasing the deer had to have been 9 feet tall, or maybe 10, shaggy and dark brown or black, like a 9-foot-tall gorilla that was shaped differently so that it could walk upright without hunching over. The face that looked at them for the brief micro moment was almost human, but it was an animal. Or at least Junior knew that face wouldn't allow him to sleep, as the creature would be lumbering through his dreams. I don't know, Sally. They were stopped, all of them, watching the dark woods around the dusty rock road. Jim started driving again, but the normally solid man was a little shaken. I don't believe in crazy shit like Bigfoot, but let me tell you. And then he started talking suddenly. But I'll be damned if I can figure out what the hell else it could have been. Poacher in a ghillie suit? Sally asked. Jim nodded. I thought about that, but there's 2 things that really bother me. What? Junior asked, inserting himself into their conversation. Jim popped a finger up in the air between he and his wife. 1, you're stupid to kill a deer this time of year. Too many chances they have parasites. You have to wait until the weather gives us a few freezes first, kills all those little buggers off. And the second? Sally asked. Only that he'd have to been wearing stilts. And I just don't think anyone's stupid enough to do that, not while hunting. He shrugged. That thing wasn't on stilts. Those legs had muscles, Pa. Junior told them both. Well, now I'm kind of pissed at myself, Sally suggested. Why's that? Jim asked his wife. We had 3 phones, state-of-the-art cameras, and none of us thought to take a damn picture. Her tone was angry. Didn't have enough time, Jim said, nodding to the phone on his dash. By the time I even thought to reach for it, the thing was gone. Junior's mom turned red. Well, nobody's going to believe us, she told her husband. He snorted. You want to get out and go look for it? I'm sure it's still out there somewhere. His sarcasm was thick. He reached for his phone, sitting on the dash, to hand her. Go take a picture if you want. I'm sure Harry out there will take a nice pose. Sally's eyes went wide, and she shook her head vigorously. Could we just go home, Dad? Junior asked in a whisper. I'm kind of creeped out. Jim nodded and started hauling ass. Federal speed limits be damned. I'll ask a guy I met once. A writer dude lives up here. He's written a Bigfoot novel or two. From what I understand, he was signing books over at the bookstore in town. What a nut? Sally asked. Jim looked over at his wife, sarcasm heavy in his eyes. Yeah. You mean something like Misery Loves Company? He might be the only person who might not think we're nuts ourselves. Jimmy Jr. decided to keep his mouth shut. He knew his dad wouldn't let it go. James Sullivan didn't believe in supernatural or strange things. He'd not stop until he found out what logical explanation there had to be. Because obviously there was one. A reasonable explanation for a 10-foot tall, hairy monster roaming the marshes of a lake in Texas. Yeah. And Junior's mother would believe in just what his dad told her to. She was that kind of person. 2 Saturdays later, Jimmy had mercifully almost forgotten about the whole thing. When, suddenly, it was all brought back, slamming him in the face after he got home from helping his uncle at work that morning. There was a man, an older guy who sat in the living room. The only difference between this guy and all the other rednecks that consisted of most of their fans and family and community was that he was recording their conversation with a camcorder on a tripod. Yes, IR cameras and digital recorders to carry, as well as night vision cameras. You'll need to look for eye shine from anything out there. I would take a week or two to get some trail cameras set up and tested before we do this, the stranger was saying, and he was excited, though he was older, his gray, short-cropped beard wagging, the cowboy hat covering what looked like a bald head. And just how much is this going to cost us? Jimmy's dad asked. The older man shook his head. Not a thing. I have all the gear, most of which was purchased for this opportunity. Or something like it. And how's that? Junior's mom asked. Sally. That's what I'm getting at, the man said. I received a grant to do a month-long investigation since the sightings have been growing in frequency over the last decade. And, Jim asked, his tone saying he knew there would be a big but coming. The park won't let me in that long. It requires shutting the place down for a month. He sat forward on the couch explaining the situation. Junior's parents sat in their dual lazy boys, and it struck him as funny, almost like a supplicant coming to the redneck king and queen. They all looked up at him. What do you think, Jim? His father asked. The guy had to know he'd come in, though Jimmy had never seen his father even twitch a glance his way. I'd call Uncle John, Jimmy shrugged. He's been complaining that he needed time to get a ton of maintenance done. The place was flooded 3 times this year. He wants some time this fall while his child to prep for next year. John? The old man tilted his cowboy hat back to scratch his forehead. Yep. Bald as cue ball. Oh, John Stafford, Jetta Operating Company. He got all the old leaks stopped up in the pipes and replaced anything over a decade old a few years back. Pipes, pumps, tanks, everything. Needs to make sure the system is sufficient so we don't have another leak. Hell, in the 90s, it seemed like there was 1 or 2, 3 every year. Pump water is worse than spilling oil itself on the lake. So he's negotiating to close it to the public. The whole refuge. He's got to finish doing whatever service he can, and he's just about got Fish and Wildlife convinced they need to do their maintenance as well. Which month? The man's face was almost white. October, I think, Jim shrugged. We can get him to let us camp up there the whole month. Just add us to the worker list. If nothing else, we can do a wildlife survey as we go for the operating company. They run all the oil pumps out there. Hell, one year they had me take pictures all winter for a calendar, I think. Sally spoke up, looking around. We'll only be allowed to have small caliber handguns and shotguns. What's guns got to do with anything? The stranger, Junior later found out, was a cryptozoologist and writer from the University of Texas. He'd already written a book on the Bigfoot of Lake Texoma. He'd been the original person to call the urban legend Harry of the Lake. Man's name was Nathan Fielder. The kid was almost 1,000% sure that despite the beard, flannel shirt, boots, that he was fake. He laughed to himself. If it took a month to get evidence they needed or wanted, it'd be torture for the man in about 3 days. If they weren't out there, he'd give up. Sally looked at the man with astonishment. I'm not going out there with a couple of pea shooters to protect ourselves. You didn't see that thing. Where are you from, anyway? And what does that have to do with it? Nathan asked. Junior's father answered him. Let me ask you a question, Nate. How many times you been camping? How many times you been camping when you were more than a week away from civilization with nothing but a bedroll and a flint stick? Well, the man said, leaning back. Not really in the rough, but I've been camping. And I've been on academic excursions. He stopped. Yeah, a little more than the university equivalent of a school field trip, I admit, but I'm game. I've studied. I know intellectually what we need to do and how to do it. I've just never actually physically done it myself. Can you even shoot a gun, mister? Junior asked from the entryway. I still do not understand why having anything other than a shotgun would be required, Nathan began. Jim held up his hand. You want to do this? Get your funding? Have a little adventure out there in the woods? We have 2 months. I'd suggest you get an AR or something similar, if nothing else. There are bands of wild pigs up there. Listen, man, you run across a group of 15, 30 pigs, and you're asleep on the ground, they'll eat you and your sleeping bag before you could even blink. They'll even grind up your bones and shit you out the other side. Bands? The man was kind of shocked. Well, mister, I saw 60 just last month over on the Oklahoma side of the lake, Junior supplied, looking to his dad. Ran through old man Jones' turnips in about 3 minutes. Nothing left but plowed up ground. Yeah. The term 30-round magazine isn't a right around here. It's a necessity. Especially if you're a rancher, farmer, hunter. You know, when I go hunting, I take a gun to hunt with and one to protect myself with. It's just the way it is, man. Nathan held up both rights. I guess, sense is sense, I'll purchase the firearm and get our funding confirmed. Though, in order to do that, I'll need documents from the refuge and the oil company. Get your gun. I'll email you a list of what to get for your trip. And then, get trained on how to use it. Do it. Where do I go to get training? Any gun shop. Probably where you buy the gun. They sell lessons. And take as many as your instructor thinks you need. Or you can just fund us and you can shoot the shit back at a hotel and you don't have to worry about it. You know, we're hunting a 10-foot tall monster. Maybe. There There are panthers out there, timber wolves, coyotes, coyote wolves, and, like I said, some 9-foot tall motherfucker that might be someone and not something. He stared the man down, Jimmy's jaw jutting out as if he had a pack of snuff in his cheek. Though Junior knew his dad knew better. The man was supposed to have quit tobacco. With all the heart issues and shit, Junior thought, pissed off. The man had a machine under his arm the size of a Coke can that had to shock him periodically because his heart would stop for no reason. Dad, Junior asked, coming into the room and setting his backpack down next to the couch. Maybe we just let this guy do it. No need to rough it if we don't have to. Jim shook his head. Not happening. Not gonna let this one go, kiddo. If there's a poacher out there, we need to get rid of him. Or get any proof we have that someone's poaching up there to the refuge folks. Most likely, though, it's a cartel guy. They've been popping up as far north as Kansas. So you're convinced that what you saw was a man in the ghillie suit after all? Nate asked. Jim nodded. Almost has to be. Especially since Sal showed me some idiot renaming stilts used to put up drywall on a ceiling and selling them as deer blind alternative. He paused and looked for something. He was using tobacco again. Junior would just have to do something about it. Maybe find his can of snuff and add lemon juice to it or something. Jim found an empty soda bottle and unscrewed the cap. Spit his disgusting refuse into the bottle. Fucking eBay, he swore, looking up as he turned the cap back on the bottle to seal it. October 1st found the little family setting up camp about 100 yards into the woods opposite the lake. A good central location in the refuge, Jim had told them all. It was early afternoon and the glow off the lake shimmered in the autumn air. Well, if autumn actually came this early, Texas usually had about a week or two of over 90-degree heat. Days in the late fall, even as late as November. Hell, a few years back it was 91 degrees on Christmas Day. They'd all spent a week setting up 50 or so trail cameras from around the approaches to the lake. They'd check the batteries and capacity every morning. The little group set up 5 tree stands. First was about 5 miles from camp, and they'd brought their ATVs, his dad's big Razor, and 2 4-wheelers that they'd set up for hunting trips. Jim was loading a crossbow quiver attached to his ATV when Nate approached. What do you think? I think you're going to be disappointed, Nate. If it's a poacher, he won't come back so long as the place is shut down, I'm sure, Jim explained. I think at the very least we get good photos of the wildlife, and if it freezes before November, he said with a smirk, get us a few rabbits and squirrels, supplement all them beans, chili, and MREs we got. Nate just nodded, looking sickly. What, you don't like rabbit or squirrel? Jim asked, smirking. Oh, not at all, though. Never had either. I have had MREs, and those things are disgusting, he explained. Jim chuckled back to the old man. Huh. Well, probably don't have to worry about the squirrel bit. Be lucky if we get a freeze before mid-November, but it does happen. Was going to point that out. Figured you'd be partial to the MREs more than the squirrel. No, Nate shook his head. Had to eat them cold once. One of those university field trips I told you about. Now even the thought of eating one of those makes me nauseous. Sally called out that their lunch was ready. Why don't you go ahead, Nate? I've got to make sure we've got everything before we ship everybody off to the stands this evening for night watch. Nate nodded and turned, walking away, hands in pockets. Jim just watched him go, not sure what the guy's intentions truly were. Was he looking to sell a best-selling novel? Hell, he doubted the guy even sold 100 copies of that book he was pawning off at the local Barnes & Noble. Late evening found Junior sitting 15 feet in the air, looking out into a meadow from about 60 yards inside the tree line. The field spread out for a few hundred yards where it met the marsh and eventually the lake. Nate sat in a chair next to the kids, and he asked, "How old are you, Jimmy?" "Jimmy, right?" Junior shrugged. "Most call me Junior, Jimmy. Just not Little Jim, okay? I'm getting a little tired of that." Nate smiled through his neatly trimmed beard. "How old are you, Jimmy?" 13, Junior responded, watching the fading light through the trees. He could see the meadow clearly, though it was growing dark, and knew that there were several game trails that converged right in their line of sight at the tree's edge. "I thought you had a job. You're 13? Nate noted, sipping coffee from a large thermos they had brought. "I work for my uncle sometimes after school on the weekends. Most weeks," Junior told him. "Oh, and you can shoot all these guns?" the man asked. "Just where are you from, Nate?" Junior asked, skeptical of the man. "I grew up in L.A., went to University of SoCal. Moved to Austin about 10 years ago," Nate admitted. "So, you ever been on a hunt?" Junior asked, startled. "Ever? Not for deer? Not for a Sasquatch? Not even for a little chupacabra? I hear there's something called a rougarou or something over in the bayou in Louisiana. Heck, that's not even a 10-hour drive from here." "Well, all my work's really been theoretical," Nate said, almost with a snobbish air. Junior snorted. "And at 13 you know so much?" Nate asked. "Dude, I know if somehow the power goes away, I can find water I can drink, food I can eat, I can build a shelter." He waved his hand at the dark woods around them. "I know how to do it without anything. I know we have canned fruits and vegetables in our sheds. We all know how to can them, too, and grow those vegetables. We know how to work and build, and I know how to take care of animals. I'm 13, not stupid," Junior told him, watching the growing dark. "So you all prep?" Nate asked, genuinely curious. Junior looked at him, disgust in his face, and it seemed almost to Nate like the kid didn't even understand the language he was speaking. "Dude, it's always been normal that we can vegetables from our garden. You think we just throw all the extra away? We live in the country. We have land and right soil to grow stuff. Not everything. You know, we don't even buy beef at the supermarkets like most folks, unless it's something special. We buy a steer every fall and we have it butchered." Nate held up a hand. I get it, different cultures." He chuckled. "Surprised you don't butcher the steer yourselves." "We used to, till Dad got sick," Junior told him, watching the night. "Sick?" Nate was a little surprised. Junior shrugged. "He's doing a lot better, but he's got a pacemaker, and his heart only functions about 30%. Nate looked startled. "Really? He seems so, vigorous, even with a limp." "Oh," the kid laughed. "It used to be like 10%, so, miracles and all that." Junior waved his hand. "And his hip replacement should come together soon. Just have to find the right doctor." "I see," Nate said, absorbed. "We should probably be quiet if we want to see anything." Junior lowered his voice and then whispered, "Nocturnal animals will start moving around soon, usually going for water first. That's why you want to be out here first light. They always take a first drink before they get up, and another drink before they bed down for the day," Kid told Nate. "Nocturnals?" Nate asked him in the same low whisper. Now he sounds like an early college person. Junior shrugged. Just what I call them. Deer, coyotes, wolves, big cats, prey and predator, circle of life, eater, eat, all that shit. He waved his hands as if it were nothing. Just the way of life, man. Now, my dad says that if your prey hears you, you'll never see a thing. Ever. Now shut the fuck up, will ya? We don't want to get snuck up on. You don't seem like a guy I can count on in a firefight. Firefight? Nate demanded harshly in his whisper. We're not playing Call of Duty, kid. Seriously? Junior sighed. Cops aren't like 10 minutes away in this place. You make a phone call, if it goes through, you gotta wait an hour and a half, 3 hours for a sheriff. And we're not more than 50 miles from one of the biggest crime-ridden cities in the state. In Texas, certain things are completely and totally illegal. But just across the border there, across that lake in Oklahoma, that same stuff's legal. So, Nate sighed, already knowing what the kid was about to tell him. So, lots of people who are up to no good are coming through here, hiding shit out here, holding up out here in the woods. People on the run from cops and worse. Junior nodded. That's why your father's so convinced that it's a man in a ghillie suit. On stilts? Nate asked. And while we have your AR, my AR, and then he patted his chest, and my grandpa's 45. And he nodded over toward the corner, and that little short shotgun there. And you're 13, Nate demanded again. Well, Nate, I don't know how old you are, but if you don't shut the hell up, you won't get much older if the odds don't favor you, Junior told him, starting to get frustrated. This moment of temper startled Nate. Did you just threaten to kill me, kid? No, you idiot. If you don't shut up, not only will we scare all the animals away, but if there are criminal asshats out here, you won't hear them coming because you're too busy talking. Junior let out a deep breath. So, really, dude, give me a break and shut the fuck up. Nate fell silent and listened to the soft sounds of the wind and the few insects that were surviving the cooling weather. Crickets were loud, plentiful, and obnoxious in the fall. Night came on, was filled with sounds most people only knew from their televisions. Junior watched the monitor, both the IR and night vision cameras attached to the laptop that sat in the little table in the stand, but nothing. And it was that way for weeks. But it was the 23rd of October. Everything changed. And I mean everything. Tempers were flaring after the long weeks of camping, watching, and generally living rough. Try going 2 or 3 weeks without showering or shaving or a decent meal, and most folks get kind of prickly about it. They had captured plenty of great pictures of the wildlife of the area. Once, even a 14-point buck. Thing had to have been as old, because it was like the biggest thing Junior had ever seen. It was amazing, and he was glad he wasn't hunting. Otherwise, he'd had to take it out, and that would have been a shame. They'd fished, they had tracked, but not even a clue of anything ape-shaped or monstrously man-shaped roaming the area. You had to have been a guy, Jim was arguing with Nate one afternoon before they were to split up and go to the stands. Well, okay. If we don't find something in the next 24 hours, then I agree. We pack it up, Nate finally gave in. He had been at his limit after the first week, but surprisingly the man was tractable and true to his word. He allowed the little family to carry him along without being obnoxious about it, and genuinely took their advice and information to heart, trying his best to fit in and do his part. The only reason the poor man hadn't given up so far was that he admittedly wanted an excuse to fund the research and possibly gain tenure at the university. Most universities are about the funding, not tenure or even education, not even the research itself. It's about getting the grants from the corporations and from governments, he admitted without a shrug. You mean the government? Jim snorted. No, I mean governments. Our government, their government, his government. Hell, if an alien government showed up, they'd try to get grants from them, he admitted with a shrug. They were going to split up. Junior was glad to be alone in the furthest stand, watching the meadows up in the northernmost point of the refuge, almost on the lake itself, out on one of the larger pads, an oil pump, pumping up and down near the small maintenance facilities that the oil operation kept out in the wild. Nate and Jim would be at the stand closest to the lake, watching from ground level the tree line from the shores of the lake itself, or at least in the marsh. The stand was something his grandpa had built, more a shelter, camouflaged and hidden in the marsh. There would be no sleeping. The old homemade duck blind was nothing more than a canvas box and a wooden park bench his Gramps had stolen. Jim and Nate had to use the monitors on the cameras themselves instead of running the wiring through the laptop, since the cameras were waterproof while the computers weren't. It was 2 a.m. when it happened. Radio crackled in the faraway stand, startling Jimmy as he stared into the blackness of the dark. Jimmy, a voice came over the band. Jimmy, are you there? Over. Sure, Dad. Jimmy yawned. Over, he informed him. He felt a little stupid for saying over every time he finished a sentence. Listen, son, there's something strange in his father's voice. Something just showed up on camera. It's hanging out just south of us and coming in and out of the tree line. And it's big, SOB. It's probably 100 yards away. But looks like it's as tall as one of the trees. We got it on the AR. On the IR, over. What's it doing? Jimmy asked, getting a little scared if he were to be honest with himself. Oh, yeah, over. He released the button he'd forgotten he was holding. The radio crackled for a moment. It's slow. It's coming toward us, but going in and out of the trees. I need you to do me a favor, kid. Jump on that four-wheeler and head this way. Stop on the road about half a mile from where we are. We'll have it on camera, but we need to get better photos and videos. Then we can get it how far away it is. Over, his father asked. What is my coming toward it gonna do? He asked his father, and he knew there was fear in his voice. Over. When it hears the sound you coming, maybe it'll run toward us, since you'll sound like you're coming from the trees. Stop just on the corner, just before it turns. It'll sound like you're right behind him, Jim explained. If we do this right, he should run right toward us and then past us, trying to hide somewhere near the shore. We can get better images that way and see exactly what we have. Over. You're not sure it's a person anymore? Jimmy almost stuttered. Over. Don't be a puss. Now take your panties off and go commando if you have to. Just get on your ass where I told you. You can take care of yourself, I know, his father told him. Read on me when you're over. I mean, there. Shit. Over now. 45 1911 loaded with hollow points strapped to his chest. An AR with a 30-round magazine of NATO 5.56 tethered to the vest, Jimmy Sullivan, Jr., slid down the ladder of the stand and jumped on his dad's old four-wheeler, taking off through the trees to the main road. Time to haul ass in the dark, he decided the full moon bright. enough for no headlights. Maybe this will be fun at least, he noted as he made the road and sped up. Junior's dad had taken the governor off the accelerator, so the engine roared down the dirt road, flinging smoky white dust into the air like a rooster tail. He made it to the point where he could see the trees thinning, and when he stopped on the white rock road, white dust flying around him in a billow, almost cutting off his oxygen, but he was sure he looked pretty cool in the moonlight. He grabbed the radio from his belt and jerked it up to his face, stabbing down on the button. Dad, I'm in position. Over. Only static came back. Dad, I made it to the spot you wanted me at, I think. He looked around. Over? He tried again. Something was wrong. He killed the engine on his four-wheeler and listened. And he heard nothing. Not a thing. Long moments passed before the silence was shocked by the rapid semi-automatic gunfire resounding just beyond the break in the trees in the direction his father and Nate were supposed to be. After almost an eternity, the radio chirped again. Get back to camp, his father was panting. Now, Jimmy, get your mom and get the fuck out of this place. Get home now, Jimmy. His dad was scared and panting. And what the fuck? Repeat, over. I'm coming to you, Dad. He clipped the radio to his vest and started the ATV again. No, don't. There was someone screaming in absolute pain in the background. The radio went staticky again for a moment and then silent. 6 more gunshots sounded in the distance toward the lake. His dad's 45, a mirror image of his own. They're at Dad, Jimmy thought, and took off at top speed, heedless of his father's wishes. After recovering from a near roll and fishtail on a sharp turn in the dusty rock that was hindering his goal, Jimmy flew toward the lake and the place his dad's old duck blind had been set up. Only it wasn't there. As Jimmy grew closer and slowed, and then switched on the headlight, flooding the area in the dim, unnatural light, he saw that it was there, but it was shredded, flattened, ripped apart, and covered in blood. The kid, fear holding him frozen and captive, up on the rumbling ATV, scanned the sight, saw nothing. He didn't know how long it was before he heard the moaning. Whatever was making the sound was under what was left of the blind. Ribbons of bloody canvas, shattered poles, and mud and muck. Thinking it was his father, Junior jumped toward the strewn debris, the cutoff switch killing his ride, and searched underneath, finding the torn and mangled body of Nate lying beneath the torn canvas. A canvas that was dark with either the lake water or, judging by Nate's condition, his blood. One of the man's eyes, hell, half his face was gone. The other side, half his cheek was sliced off. But the man was breathing, sort of, kind of a choking gurgle. Jimmy couldn't get a good look at him, but he knew this guy's body was broken, and there was nothing a 13-year-old kid could do to fix that. What? Jimmy was in shock, again, fighting the shackles of his fear. The bloody face turned, and that lone eye, filled with terror, focused on the frozen boy. Why aren't you gone, kid? You and your mom long gone by now. What? Jimmy began, then stopped. Where's my dad? His fear turning momentarily to anger, the old man coughed several times, blood coming up with each hacking croup. It isn't us. It's not. Startled coughing, blood boiling out of his mouth. It's not an animal. A monster. He emptied. We emptied. Every bullet. It kept coming. Leave. Where's my dad? Jimmy demanded. Running. On the lake. Fishing canoe. The man was going. Jimmy could tell. Nate was dying. What is it? Jimmy demanded. Don't. Monster. And both the coughing and the light in Nate's eyes stopped. Jimmy was lost, stuck in a place staring at a dead man, at a ravaged face, the boy's mind empty. The fear had consumed him and replaced him with the emptiness of death just before him. He didn't know how long he was like that. I mean, he'd seen things die, animals. Hell, he killed plenty of deer and rabbit and squirrel. He'd cut fish up himself, but not a human, not a person, not a living, breathing being who was just like Junior, aware of their existence, able to think, reason, and be self-aware. Even if it was not one he was really connected to or understood, it was a conscious life, a sentience that was lost. In that moment, James Sullivan Jr. understood something he'd never really contemplated before, but already had known. That's why taking a human life is the worst sin. It's not about the person you kill. It's about their potential, the loss. How many Einsteins? Squelchy footsteps, rapid from the distance, woke him from that stasis that fear had him locked in, that death had clenched him upon. Jimmy spun, his hands grasping his AR, raising it. A monster. There was no other word for it. It was a fucking monster. It ran toward him from the lake. It lumbered like a great ape that had stood up and leaned forward into it. Almost like a great ape that was a sprinter. In his fear, he couldn't tell how far the thing was. Thing looked like half a man and half something animal, so large it skewed any determination of distance the boy could make. It was almost 10 feet tall. Long, stringly, blood-soaked fur covered it from head to toe. There was no fur, only on its belly, hands, and face. Its hands almost drug the ground as it ran, long, slender fingers half curled, its nails long, ragged claws. The beast's fur looked black and red in the moonlight, its face a mask of pure rage, almost of this thing, this monster were the avatar of such things. And his face changed as it ran, elongating in the moonlight, fangs growing, and tusks binding. Jimmy was firing before his brain even registered the action. The steady crack of a semi-automatic rifle was quick, but ineffectual. Hell, even if he was allowed an automatic weapon, it would have done little good. The monster slowed only a little, shrugging off the jacketed rounds. His clip ran dry, and like the automatic machine his father had made him into, he dropped the AR and pulled his grandfather's 1911 from his chest holster, the one his pop had used in the army, and unloaded it into the beast just as it reached for Jimmy's head. A sharp, quick, hot track ran across the kid's face as he fell backwards into the muck of the marshy edge of the lake, popping out the clip and reaching for another even as he fell into the water. The massive shape of the raged beast blotted out the moonlight. His brain hadn't registered what his body was trying to fight. Jimmy was a dead kid, though the boy managed to dump another full 8-round clip into the creature before everything in the entirety of existence was gone. James Sullivan Jr. woke to the odors of sharp antiseptic and his cousin disinfectant. A terrible ache was behind his left eye, unlike anything he had ever known. His entire face on fire, and even catching his breath was all but impossible. The whole of his torso felt like a pounding, beaten, bloody bruise. The light hurt him as he fluttered his right eye open, the one, it seemed, without a patch. Watching the stark white and stainless hospital room come into focus, he tried to focus on the visual and not the internal pain. His parents were standing there. An unknown relief washed over him, and they knew he'd come awake in the room. "Thank God," Sally cried as she reached for him out of instinct. "Careful," Jim admonished, grasping his wife's arms. "He's still really banged up, babe. Almost every rib on his right side is broken, and his head." "I am right here," Jimmy croaked. "Water," the kid choked, his throat having clenched shut due to the seeming lack of moisture. His mother pressed a cup into Jimmy's hand, and he noted now this one sip of water had been more precious to him in that moment than any other thing he'd ever touched. "How long?" he asked after a moment, sipping the water from the paper cup. "A week," he told his son. "I've been in and out, off and on for a week." "What was—" He shuddered, almost letting the fear overwhelm him enough to loosen his bowels. "Wait," Jimmy thought. "That might just be a catheter." His father was shaking his head. "We don't know, Jimmy, and I'm not sure we'll ever find out." Kid tried to shake his head, but found it hurt his eyes too much. "Just post the videos and pictures we got. Someone can tell us. You had them on camera. There are too many people in the world. Somebody's seen something." "Son of a bitches," Sally swore even as Jim shook his head to his son. "There aren't any videos, no pictures, no physical evidence at all," he told his boy. "What? Did the cameras not work?" Kid was confused. He'd helped test everything after all. He was the only tech-savvy one among them. "Wait, we have the busted blind in the blood," Jimmy argued. "And they can't say there was a bear on Lake Texoma." Again, Jim shook his head. "Nope. The fish and game wardens confiscated everything, even Nate's body." "What?" Jimmy asked. "And we, all three of us, including you." She paused, her face red. "And I'm not sure how they can enforce it on a minor, but all three of us have been put under a gag order by the federal government. If we talk to anyone other than the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we can be fined and jailed." Jimmy's eyes stabbed him with pain as he tried to widen them in astonishment. A sharp pain that went directly from his left eye socket to his spine, lighting up every fucking nerve on their way to their end goal. How bad? Jimmy waved at himself as best he could. Concussion, broken ribs, all of them on one side, collapsed young. His mother began listing off as if she would list off her grocery worksheet. You needed 123 stitches, boy, mostly in your face. There'll be pretty bad scarring, I'm afraid, his father told the boy. And you lost your eye, your left one, completely. His voice was low and apologetic. Loss hit Jimmy. Found his hand touching the bandage that wrapped his face. Yeah, Jimmy just sat there. Junior no more. Kid no more. James Sullivan, the adult. Nothing touched it, Dad. I emptied the entire everything into him. And then Gramps' gun. And it didn't even faze him. His voice was dazed. You're lucky to be alive, his father told him, even as his mother ran around the other side of the bed to grasp his hand. Well, Jimmy told his dad, at least I get a cool eye patch, right? Did it look scary? But his tone was a satire of the light. It was filled with darkness. His father chuckled, his emotions in the same vein. That's a good way to put it, I suppose. Though, the man's expression was doubtful. I think, though, Jimmy said, that we need bigger guns before we go back, whatever it is. And we get someone smarter than that college dude. Nate was a good guy, I guess, but had no idea what he was doing. Researcher. Maybe there's someone who might know what it is, how to kill it. I doubt they'll let us back out there, Jim told his son. Jimmy stared at him, his father, and then his mother. His mother shook her head sadly. Let? Our lake? Jimmy snorted, though that too pained him, and he shuddered with the force of it. 5 generations on this lake. They'll never know we're even there. This time, we find old Harry, we kill his ass, and drag him out into the light. And then all those sons of bitches can kiss our asses. Sally shook her head and groaned. Just like your goddamn father. Jim chuckled. If I ever find out who that son of a bitch is, I'm going to punch him in his nose. I hope you've enjoyed this story and enjoyed the just the tips that led up to it. I'm hoping to be working a little bit more consistently, but things come up. Life is short, and we do what we can. So, again, I hope this was a little better quality and that you guys enjoyed the way it ultimately went. And, again, give me any criticism you have for these stories. That's the only way I'm going to get better at writing them. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, your life, that's your story. Make it a great one. Good night.